This is Trend Following Radio, where great thinking comes alive. Nobel Prize winners, legendary traders, best-selling authors, and the pros that know what drive us irrational human beings. I am your host, Michael Covel. Not filtered, raw, honest. That's my passion. Today on the show, I have Sally Hogshead. She's an American author, speaker, former advertising executive, as well as the chief executive officer of Fascinate, Inc. I came across Sally a few years ago with her book, Fascinate. Her newest book, How the World Sees You, Discover Your Highest Value Through the Science of Fascination, is out now. And for the first 500 people, yes, this sounds like a sales pitch, but it's a really cool assessment that Sally has developed. She's developed an assessment, a personality assessment that shows how the world views you. I took it. Very cool. Her book's very cool. Very, very wise lady. I'm going to put the link to this free assessment in the write-up for the podcast. And the special code, not surprising, is Trend Following. All one word, Trend Following. I hope you enjoy this conversation. If you'll indulge me for just 30 seconds or 60 seconds, I'll tell you how I ended up coming to speak with you today.
Oh, yeah.
So 2-3 years ago, I'd read this great book by Seth Godin called Linchpin. Mm-hmm. First 30 pages, I'm like, okay, this guy's got it nailed. This is how the world is today. He knows exactly what's going on. These two friends of mine, two ladies, one worked for me, named Michelle worked for me, and her friend Erin worked for a private jet airline. And they knew I liked this book. And then Erin had met somebody, a client on the jet, and he was reading this book, Fascinate. And they're like, oh, we must give this book to Michael. They did not read it. They did not do anything. They just knew, oh, the guy's like, yeah, if he likes Seth Godin's Linchpin, he's going to love this. They give me the book. Okay. I dig in. I start reading this fascinating story about why women at lap dancers, strip clubs make more money at certain points in time of the month. So I went back to my two friends who are probably a little more wholesome than I am. And I start saying, listen, there's this fascinating story in this book. And they both look at me aghast and they're like, oh my gosh, what did we give this man?
And what does this have to do with branding?
Exactly.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, the new book definitely builds upon that. And one of the things that I tried to do is to be smart. Like the strip club story is very polarizing. I talk about a black swan. You know, it's so on the fringe that for the person who is truly who I want to talk to, they love stories like that. And for other people, it can sometimes become too polarizing.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that as I was reading it. I was like, well, you know, not everybody will have the same sensibility where they can accept that. They might get lost there and not get to the most important messaging.
Yeah. You're right. They lose it for the whole. But that one of the things that I love so much about that book was the research process of uncovering these kind of Malcolm Gladwellian stories and making these connections. But I had to discipline myself not to do that on this one. Have you ever had that happen that you become so immersed in a project you're working on, a story that you're telling, that you have to be careful to make sure that it's also accessible for other people because you would get so involved in those fringe element stories?
Absolutely. The fringe elements are the best. I mean, I remember my first book, I was trying to figure out in a trading book, how could I get the line from Dean Wormer in Animal House about being fat, drunk, and stupid was no way to go through life. And I was trying to figure out how can I get this into the book? Of course, there's no real reason for it to be in there, but it was important to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, listen. Okay, let's jump right in. So you and I took the Fascination Advantage survey, which to me was really interesting because I'm actually qualified to administer the Myers-Briggs instrument.
Oh, no kidding.
Yes.
I have your report in front of me, by the way.
Do you? I'm an INTP?
No, your Fascination Advantage report.
Oh, okay. The Myers-Briggs side, I'm an INTP.
Ah.
Yeah. So.
And that fits with mystique and innovation that you're observant, you're intellectual, but you also have a strong creative streak.
Let me do this, though. Before we even get into this, I haven't really introduced where we're going to go today and why this is all important and your expertise. First off, this power of fascination. Why don't you describe the kind of initial elevator pitch about fascination and what you have done, and perhaps give a little bit of background as to how you even got to this point to put all this cool information together?
Mm-hmm. Fascination is an intense focus. And when you're fascinated by someone, you are completely immersed in what they're saying. You're listening to them without being distracted. You're not feeling doubt. You're not feeling confusion. And it's critical to be able to fascinate your listener, not just to get their attention or interest them. It's critical to be able to really grip their full focus so that they're not thinking about their iPhone. They're not thinking about their next meeting. When you talk to a prospect or an employee or a customer or a client, and you're fascinating them in that moment, you're able to really create a connection with them. And as things become more distracted, more competitive, more commoditized, it becomes even more important to be able to do this immediately and to know how your personality is most likely to do this. About 10 years ago, I began studying why do certain companies or people or messages fascinate us and other ones don't earn our attention. And what I found is there are very specific patterns. There are 7 different categories of things that fascinate us. And in my last book, Fascinate, I described how brands use these 7 different advantages, these 7 modes of communication. But then what I noticed was everybody kept coming up to me and saying, tell me about me. What makes me fascinating? How do I do this? And so 4 years ago, I began studying individuals and teams and why are some people naturally more effective when they communicate? And I discovered that all of us in our communication, we're using certain patterns that we're not even aware of. And that our listener is responding to us or not responding to us based on how we build our messages, how we shape our communication. So I created the Fascination Advantage Assessment, and we've since measured 300,000 professionals, and we found that the high performers inside of teams, inside Fortune 100 companies, inside small businesses, the high performers have something very specific in common. And that is they understand how to communicate in a way that immediately adds value to their listener. Every time you communicate, you're either adding value or you're taking up space. And if you're adding value, people want more from you. They want your opinions. They're attracted to you professionally. They're hungry to hear more of what you're going to say. They take action on your words. But if you're just taking up space, you're kind of like human spam. People start to block you out. They filter out what you say. They don't read your emails. They don't listen to your opinions in meetings. So the key is to understand how is your personality naturally primed to add value to your listeners so that you can instantly impress and influence them so that your words are heard and remembered and acted upon.
Okay, how did you go down this, quote, fascinating path? What were you doing at 25? What were you doing at 20? What happened? How did this happen? And where did you get the word fascination? What an awesome word as a person that thinks about brands and book titles and stuff. What a great word, fascinate.
I was originally studying 10 years ago. I shifted over from advertising to in writing a book to understanding why do we pay attention to certain things, certain companies, certain people, and not others. And I wanted to understand exactly what that was. And as I was looking in a journal, I found this word fascination. And turns out this is really cool. Talk about being attracted to an obscure story. The word fascination means to bewitch or captivate or hold captive so that the person is powerless to resist. It's ancient Latin. So originally it was about shepherds in the field. And the shepherds wanted to make sure that their sheep didn't get distracted and wander off. So they talk about this concept of fascination. How do you make somebody captive to listen to what you're saying? And the word has all kinds of amazing connotations throughout time. It was seen as an evil force in Constantinople and Mesopotamia, because when somebody is fascinated, they're powerless to resist. So I did about a year of research, finding what is it that fascinates us? And why is it that sometimes we don't know why we're fascinated by a slice of chocolate cake or a Britney Spears video or a TED speech? It's almost as though we lose our powers of decision. And Sigmund Freud describes this beautifully. He refers to fascination as a bondage of love. I drew upon my advertising background. For the first half of my career, I was an advertising creative director. I created national television commercials for brands like Nike and Coca-Cola and Target. And I took the experience that I had with understanding how to shape perception and how do you tap into something that is a natural inherent advantage within a message, within a brand. And how can you steer that? And how could you use that in your career? And I discovered that a traditional personality assessment is based on one thing, and that is, how do you see the world? Myers-Briggs, StrengthsFinder, DISC, Colby, they all show you how you see the world, but they don't show you the opposite. They don't show you how the world sees you. So to understand how the world sees you, we have to go outside psychology and we have to look at branding. Branding tells us how the world sees you. Coca-Cola knows how its consumer sees it. A hardware store knows how its customer sees it, but we as individuals don't necessarily know how the world sees us. So that's what I developed in this new batch of research around this book, How the World Sees You. It shows you exactly how the world sees you at your best.
It was really, really interesting because you're spot on as somebody, as I mentioned, that taken a little bit of training to administer the MBTI years ago. And I guess it's interesting that I know that I'm introverted. It's interesting that I know that I'm perceiving versus judgmental, or judging, but what can I do with it really? It's more, and it always seemed like to me, and I only did it kind of as a lark, but it always seemed to me that people that were really into it were like building these office structures where they would walk around with these little 4-word labels or 4-letter labels on their lapel. And it's like, right. It started to seem a little bit just cultish to me. And I'm not trying to be mean to anybody or any other operation, but I thought the flipping that you've done, the flipping of how does people see, and then being able to kind of look at assessment and forcing yourself, which I was doing last night, reading my assessment. Oh, wow, that's really accurate. And oh, wow, I've wasted a lot of time doing something that I shouldn't waste my time on. And oh, wow, maybe I should be focusing on what's brought me to the party to begin with.
And what people really value in you, and what you're already doing right, so you can do more of it. You've articulated it beautifully. Myers-Briggs and a traditional personality assessment does a great job of telling you how you see the world, so that helps to inform you what kind of perspective you're going to have on other people. But it doesn't tell you what other people are most impressed and influenced by in your natural personality. If we look at what great brands do 3 things when they build their communication. First of all, they don't focus on how they're similar to other brands. They focus on how they're different. Yet in the workplace or in our jobs, as entrepreneurs, as leaders, as employees, we tend to focus on how we're similar or better. And that's where this whole concept of strengths comes from. If you focus on your strengths, you're trapped in a hamster wheel trying to outdo other people. But if you focus on your differences, you have a lot more room to carve out a very specific place so that people can associate certain advantages with you. The second thing that brands do that's really powerful is brands understand their differences can be very small and subtle. A Gillette razor is very similar to a Schick razor, to a generic razor. It might only be a 1/1,000,000th of an inch difference, but yet that 1/1,000,000th of an inch is a competitive advantage. And in the same way, your personality has certain very specific differences, which I outline in your Fascination Advantage report. And when you focus on those differences, you can get a competitive edge over other people who are vying for your prospects' attention, or trying to get in front of your customer, or trying to lead your employees away.
Sally, as I'm sitting here, I'm looking at my survey, my assessment, and maybe not that I want to talk about myself, but since you're the pro, you're the expert, and you're looking at mine, and we want the audience and this is not, we've never talked before. It's not like a sales pitch or anything, but this is damn interesting. So I highly recommend my people to go do it. So why don't we go through mine and maybe let you explain, I think maybe people get a kick out of it, explain what it means that I am a secret weapon and that my primary advantage is mystique, secondary advantage, innovation, and my dormant advantage is trust. And clearly, how many archetypes are there?
There are 49 different archetypes, and they're organized according to 7 different advantages. And if you like, I can go through, and using you as an example, I can describe.
I'm the guinea pig. I'm the guinea pig. Kill me, eat me. Dude, what you got to do?
Kill you. I'm going to give you kind of some of the personality steroids. So what I found in my research that I was describing earlier, there are 7 different types of advantages, 7 modes of communication. For example, the passion advantage is all about building immediate relationship. People with a primary passion advantage, in other words, people who naturally communicate using the passion advantage, love to be able to meet new people. They use a lot of body language. They make eye contact. They tend to be very emotive when they talk. They're very sensitive to what other people are thinking and feeling. They like to get emotionally engaged quickly. On the other hand, typically, they tend to not be great with details. They're not strong with follow through. They tend to not make decisions rationally. They make them by their gut. So there are advantages, and then there are also pitfalls that come with each one of these. Another example would be the trust advantage. Trust personalities, people with primary trust, tend to be great at systems. They like to do the same thing over and over again. They come into work at the same time every day. They're very predictable. They're practical. They're reliable. They're consistent. This makes them really good in jobs such as an administrative assistant or somebody who's going to be in charge of a process that's going to go for many years into the future without changing. On the other hand, their pitfall is they're really not good at creativity. They tend to not like change. They're uncomfortable with chaos. You wouldn't find them in a startup environment, for example. So now shifting this over, let's take a look at you. Mm-hmm. Your primary advantage is mystique. Mystique personalities are observant. They're intellectual. It's almost like they're chess players. They're able to listen and observe very closely, take in a lot of complex information, and then sort it through, putting everything in order. And this gives them a huge competitive advantage when other people are making snap decisions or other people are throwing random information against the wall and discrediting themselves or being erratic in how they behave. A mystique personality, on the other hand, sees everything that's happening and then processes it to be able to make sure that they're putting their chips on exactly the right place. Very, very strategic advantage. Your secondary advantage, meaning on the score of the 7, the one that you score next highest, is innovation. And innovation is all about creativity. So people with a primary or secondary innovation love to brainstorm solutions to problems. They don't get stuck in a rut. They're able to give a proliferation of ideas. So if you and I were working together, your two key advantages are primary mystique, secondary innovation, meaning you're going to listen carefully to everything I say, but then you're going to be able to come forth with all kinds of different options and solutions and variables, and to be able to see things in a very complex, rich way. Your archetype, when you combine your primary with your secondary, you get an archetype. Your archetype is named the secret weapon. And I love working with secret weapons. And here's why.
You just got very breathy there all of a sudden. I got frightened.
I have a special relationship with secret weapons. Secret weapons to me are the most, they're intellectual chameleons. They are able to go into a situation, whether that situation is a cocktail party or a client meeting or a blog, a podcast, and they're able to very quickly ascertain exactly what's going on with the other people in the room and then adjust to make sure that they get the best possible result. Secret weapons are rare. And in business, they're outstanding problem solvers because they tend to not draw the attention to themselves. They put all of their energy into figuring out what are options that I can present here. And so on the surface, they tend to have a very buttoned down appearance, but on the inside, they're teeming with all different types of ideas. And so if you and I were working together, the way in which you're going to add the most value is through 3 adjectives. The 3 adjectives of the secret weapon, your top 3 adjectives are nimble, unassuming, and independent. Nimble is the ability to generate all different types of solutions. Unassuming means that although you're very creative, you're not going to be the one with the nose ring and the red mohawk and razzle dazzle. You're not going to churn a lot of drama or fuss. And your third adjective is independent, and that means that you work extremely well when you're being able to be the intellect behind the scenes. You're not the person who needs to tap into your team constantly. You don't need a lot of hand holding. You really like to be able to be an entrepreneur and stay focused on what you want to do and then join the team when you're ready to. So when you're working, Michael, when you're working with people, imagine you go into a high pressure communication situation like a pitch, like a presentation, a meeting, maybe a difficult conversation with a client. Can you give me an example of a time when you want to play your A game?
It's really weird. I don't know if this is answering your question, but if somebody gives me a stage, like in the last 12 months where I was afforded a stage in Beijing and Shanghai, and they say, here's 750 people in the audience that don't speak English, and they're all going to wear headphones, and you have to talk for 30 seconds and then wait for us to translate, and this is all broadcast live. And I actually feel more comfortable walking into that than maybe I do sitting alone sometimes. That kind of is, that's easy. It's comfortable.
It's comfortable for you. When you feel comfortable, you feel more confident, and you probably feel like you can put your ideas together in a more organized and effective way, don't you?
Yeah. I mean, comfort is huge. I mean, I think because look, just from a pure distraction standpoint, if our minds are all distracted and we have all kinds of stuff going on, you just can't create, you can't innovate, you can't think. And so it is very key, at least from my perspective, to have a clear deck, an open mind, and really be able to focus.
When you get in that state of focus, that's a state of fascination that you feel. It's almost like being in a state of flow, that you feel energized, you feel confident, you feel like your ideas come more easily. We've all had these moments where you're having a conversation with a friend, or you're standing in front of a boardroom and you're making a presentation, or you're trying to explain an idea to a colleague, and it becomes perfectly clear for you, and it's very energizing. It's an amazing feeling when you can communicate yourself in exactly the right way, whatever that means for you. And this is what happens when you understand how the world sees you at your best, that you can stop floundering around trying to figure out how you should stand and what words you should use and how do you communicate your ideas and how is the other person thinking about you in that moment. It gives you a clarity and a focus so that you can find those situations that you're most primed to be able to get your listener into a state of fascination so that you're connected with them and you feel a sense of ease. They feel relaxed. You're able to front load your value by speaking in a way that gets an actionable result for them. And they perceive you as being more confident and more authoritative. And for you, the example that you just described is a perfect example. When you're on stage and you're putting your thoughts together, even though that seems like a really challenging environment with the translation and having that happen in real time, for you, because you have primary mystique, and we were saying that it's very intellectual, it's very complex, it's able to handle data in an unusual way, piecemealing and strategizing your communication is really easy for you. But for a lot of people, that would be their communication nightmare. That would really throw them off.
It's kind of fun to have the crazy stuff happen. Hey, but listen, go into to the dormant advantage, because you've made me sound like all nice and sweet and wonderful and all these things. So why don't we stick the red hot poker in it and lance my midsection and let me bleed out now with my dormant advantage of trust.
Is Bleed Out a reference? Do you remember Hot Zone? It was a book. It was
yes, a book I read it. Yeah.
Was it? Yes. So you can think about your dormant advantage is of the seven, it's the one on which you score lowest. And your dormant advantage is exhausting for you to use. If you think about it like quicksand, there's certain types of communication situations that you dread and you're not going to win in them. And it feels very effortful. It's discouraging. It's demoralizing. For some people, people with a dormant mystique advantage, maybe you have primary mystique. For people with dormant mystique, they don't want to think in a structured way. They want to be able just to say what they're thinking while they're thinking it. They don't want to withhold anything. They don't want to have to organize their thoughts before they jump right in with both feet. You, on the other hand, are very different than that. You have a different way of communicating. Your dormant advantage is the trust advantage. And it's the same one as me. I have a dormant trust advantage too. Remember, before I was describing, people with primary trust advantage are highly structured. They like patterns. They like to do the same thing over and over again, and they get comfort from being predictable. And so they're great with very highly process-oriented rules system, like an accountant would have primary trust. You and I, on the other hand, we tend to resist doing the same thing over and over. We like change. We embrace being able to invent a new path. So if I came to you, Mike, and I said, Mike, I'm really stuck. I need help coming up with a new idea. What would it feel like for you if I came to you with that kind of a challenge and help me figure out a new path? Would that feel like wellspring, or would that feel like quicksand?
I don't know. As long as you were open, we could throw everything on the table and we could toss around ideas and debate, and that you were truly open, that there wasn't this fake openness, that there was something you really wanted to make it better and you really didn't have your mind already made up and I was just there for a dog and pony show.
Yeah, if I was really there for an action instead of just randomly discussing it, for you that would feel very productive, and you would have a high chance of winning. You have a really high chance in a situation when I come to you like that and I say I need some new solutions. You can bring forth your A game effortlessly, predictably, over and over again. It feels really natural for you. On the other hand, if I said, Michael, I've got this spreadsheet and I just want to replicate it over and over again all day long. Can you help me with that? What would that feel like for you?
I'd ask you to pass me the gun so I could kill myself.
Yes. So there's some situations where you're naturally suited to win. The situations that you're naturally suited to win are all described by your primary and secondary advantage. If somebody is looking for independent solutions that with high degrees of variables and a lot of strategy, then for you, that's going to feel like something that's very, very easy for you to over deliver. On the other hand, doing the exact same thing over and over in a rigid structure, almost mathematical way, is going to be totally exhausting.
Let me take it on that point though, because it's really interesting as I start this conversation mentioning Seth Godin's book Linchpin, and I'm guessing that you probably share a lot of the beliefs there. And what he's mapped out, frankly, is that perhaps, our lives are essentially sprung from being independent entrepreneurs ultimately. But a lot of people, isn't that the path though? The path of being, look, I've spent the last year and a half in Asia. And many of my Asian friends, I was just in Tokyo less than a month ago. And in Tokyo, I would think for 99% of the population, it seems like the primary advantage would be trust. It's very orderly. Everything's very orderly. But aren't we facing a tipping point at some point in time where what we have seen as order for the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years, that this more nimble, entrepreneurial-minded way, aren't we moving that direction? Isn't that the real opportunity for people today? Because I'm not trying to criticize the idea of people saying that their primary advantage is trust. These are not necessarily, I'm guessing, are not necessarily meant to be one's better than the other. But if you really would be objective about the playing field that we look at today, the business playing field, the career playing field, it sure seems like that trusting a system that allows you to just do the same thing every day, that opportunity is going away.
Yes. And in a situation or a marketplace in which everybody's really creative, trust becomes even that much more rare. So it becomes that much more coveted. And here's an example of what I mean. As part of my research with 300,000 professionals, we went inside high performing companies and we looked at their high performers. We went inside AT&T and GE and Cisco and Unilever. And we measured what was happening on their teams and what was happening with their leaders. And we found that there were specific things that distinguished the high performers from everybody else. And the number one thing that we discovered they were doing is they have a personality specialty of some kind. In other words, they provide a specific benefit. People who were detail oriented were really detail oriented. People who were able to bring a team together and rally the team and motivate people to get bigger results, like to meet a quota or to over-deliver for a certain client, were able to really bring the team together. So success in any kind of an ecosystem has a lot to do with what makes you different than everybody else. Remember, we were talking before about brands. High performers understand that they need to be worth more than they're being paid, and that the ways in which they're similar to other people are far less valuable than the ways in which they're different. And so high performers identify the ways in which they're different, and then they use that and apply it and double down, focusing on it, almost exaggerating it. So within an environment, whether it's with a team or in a commoditized marketplace, you don't want to be like your competitor or like your coworker or other people in your industry. You want to be as unlike them as possible. It's not about focusing on your strengths. It's about focusing on your differences and then leveraging that, amplifying that so that you can not only carve out a place for yourself in the market, but so that you can specialize in some specific way.
I keep wanting to say the cliche that this is fascinating. Hey, we only got a few minutes left. I want to jump around to, I made some notes here of just things that I loved in your work. And I think they're kind of like fun examples to get people thinking. I mean, I highly recommend checking out your written work. And I think we've got something where people will be able to take, at least a certain number of people could take the F score through
The Fascination Advantage. That you have a magic code to give to them.
It's terribly secret. You picked a hard one.
So would you like me to introduce that?
Well, no, we'll bring that up at the end. I want to give a couple few points out here that I just want you to kind of run over, because it's almost like the strip club story that I think it'll get people thinking your way of thinking, even though it's not necessarily connected in a through line. And one of the things that I would love for you to talk about is you're now talking about not being a commodity, right? And in your work, you talk about your friend, David Scott. And I thought it was so brilliant what he did. Here is, David Scott. You type it in Google. Look, I've got a cool last name. Okay. Not cool, but it's a good last name, kind of like yours. Are there any other Sally Hogshead? I don't think so, right? Are there any Michael Covels? Not really. So it's great for Google. I mean, if anybody has any idea how Google works, it's just fantastic. David Scott, not good for Google. So how did he solve it?
David Scott was one of about 3 million other David Scotts, including a senator and an astronaut. So he had a problem. He wasn't being found on Google, and this was his expertise, being online PR and building an online brand. And so he started using his middle name. And his middle name is Meerman. And for those people who are listening, they probably have heard this name before, David Meerman Scott. And just by making that subtle shift, he was able to not only rise in Google ranks, but to differentiate himself in a very literal way. In the same way, in this new book, How the World Sees You, I described there are parts of your personality that you can accent, that you can highlight to differentiate yourself. For example, if you're very restrained, you're not a personality that throws yourself out there immediately, you're discreet, well, then you don't want to try to be the person who's the life of the party, walking in and, glad handing and backslapping. Instead, you want to build a reputation for being skillful, for being stable, for being hardworking, level-headed, whatever traits come naturally to you. And this is what's described in the Fascination Advantage. When you know what words describe you perfectly, it allows you to make sure that you're focusing on that every time you communicate, not just the words that you're literally using in your LinkedIn profile or the about section of your website, but it's also knowing how you're most suited to win so that you can be more confident and your listener can hear what you're saying and not just listen to you, but be fascinated.
You have 8 kids?
My husband and I have 8 kids together. Yes. They range from 10 to 24.
So I have a friend of mine who's a hedge fund manager, and he has 8 kids too. And he had 8 kids in 8 years, eight total calendar years.
Holy moly.
Yeah. That's not necessarily related to our conversation, but I just have to.
It's the little obscure factoids.
Yes. You could already tell that's who you're dealing with. I have another couple here before we wind down and let people know about the F Advantage. This I just love. If you're not generating a negative reaction from someone, you're probably not fascinating anyone.
Listen, we live in a commoditized environment. People are distracted. Your competition is better than it ever was before. If you're not focusing on people to grip their attention and to deliver something that nobody else can, then you're at severe risk of being perceived as a commodity, the same as everyone else. And when that happens, once you're not adding value and you're taking up space, you have to take your prices down. You're not going to create loyalty. You're not going to get referrals. On the other hand, if you talk really specifically in the way that's most natural and authentic to you, for your personality, and you hone in on those core differences, then you're going to attract certain people who are going to become rabid fans. And then other people are simply going to fall off and they're not going to be attracted to your message. And that's fine. You want to be a little polarizing. It's kind of like the difference between pistachio ice cream and vanilla ice cream. Vanilla appeals to everyone. You can be the vanilla of your category if you have the biggest budget or if you're the most famous. But if you don't have the biggest marketing budget or you're not the most famous, then don't be vanilla. Instead, be pistachio. Pistachio doesn't try to talk to everybody. It tries to only talk to a few people, but it talks to them really, really well. So people don't just like pistachio. They crazy love pistachio. On the other hand, a lot of people hate pistachio, and that's fine. They would never buy it in the first place. You don't want to be the vanilla of your category. Instead, find those pistachio elements of your personality so that you can grow your business around that, grow your career around it.
Basically, what you're telling me is it's a good thing that I have extreme hating on my Amazon reviews. It's a good thing that it seems like shut-ins that are probably in their mom's basement that are cursing me out on Amazon reviews, that's a good thing, and that I'm probably, if I didn't have those, I would have no success. Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, exactly. One of my clients for a year was Jägermeister. People either love Jägermeister or they hate it. And the reality is that the more you dislike Jägermeister, the more likely you are to drink it, because Jägermeister is not selling itself on the basis of a great taste or low price or convenience. Jägermeister is selling itself on the basis of a specific type of experience. As I was doing research for Jägermeister, I talked to a bartender who said, there are two types of drunk. There's drunk, and then there's Jägermeister drunk. And so when people order Jägermeister, they're not looking for deliciousness. They're looking for kerosene. You're drinking battery acid, and that's the whole point. Is it's an experience that everybody's going to bond together over, like the Iditarod, and people are going to remember it. So in the same way, you don't want to build your business around the ways in which you're similar. You don't want to be the vanilla. You don't want to try to see what other people are doing and then be better than them. Instead, figure out what can you do that nobody else can do. And there are ways that you naturally are suited to be like those high performers I described, and to deliver a specific benefit, a specialty. And that's what I describe in How the World Sees You.
It's been a long time, but Jägermeister is something to the effect of the inappropriate removal of clothes would be what that should be the catch line on Jägermeister. Okay, Sally. So the F score, you're going to give some folks that are listening the opportunity to go ahead and take this. And like I said, like we've never talked today, and I just took mine yesterday, but it is really interesting, and I highly recommend it. It's got me thinking more about how I should position myself, frankly, not to sound too academic about it, but I mean, it definitely gets you thinking about how the world perceives you.
Yeah, it gives you the words that you can actually cut and paste right into your LinkedIn profile, or if you're making an introduction at a networking event, or you're doing a proposal, somebody's saying, why should I work with you? You can just cut and paste the language that's in the report and put it right in there. Plagiarize me blatantly. And here's how to do that. The Fascination Advantage is normally $37, but Michael's making it available for free for you for a limited amount of time. And it's, you can access it here. Go to howtheworldseesyou.com/you, YOU. howtheworldseesyou.com/you. And the code is trend following, all one word. It's not case sensitive. Trend following, all one word. And when you take the assessment, it's 28 questions, takes about 3 minutes. You can do it on your phone, but it's based on a custom algorithm that identifies how people see you at your best, so that you can understand how do you focus on what you're already doing right. And immediately you get a 15-page report that goes into great detail on how you compare to the average population. What are your primary and secondary advantages, so that you can focus on those? What's your dormant advantage, so you can avoid that? And how do you use that to build a more successful career?
It's very cool stuff, Sally.
Thank you.
Hopefully we can cross paths sometimes soon in the future. I would enjoy chit-chatting. We've already been chit-chatting, but I love your stuff. And like I said, I've not seen the second book, but the first book, Fascinate. Actually, you've done 3 books now, is it?
Yes, I did. My first book was 10 years ago. My second book, Fascinate, was about 4 years ago. And then this new book, How the World Sees You, just came out. Just came out a week ago. In fact, this is still shiny new information. It was just number 2 New York Times, number 1 Wall Street Journal bestseller. And
that is very cool.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
That is very cool. And you're going to have quite a few people wanting to see how the world sees you, for sure. So. Oh,
cool. Well, thank you for talking with me. I have to tell you, I love your work, and there's so much overlap between the things that you find fascinating and understanding that conversations and business and trends can go in really unexpected places. So I have loved getting to know your work and learning how the world sees you, Michael.
Sally, it was good chatting, and you've probably got a full house to go take care of. But hold on, they're all in the house still, yes?
They're not.
No.
Thank goodness.
Okay. Hey, Sally, listen, take care and best of luck with the book. Hopefully it's not number 1 yet, right?
it's weaving back and forth. So,
it has made one.
I appreciate being able to share it with everybody and sharing it with you.
Sally, thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. I see a time when those awake will understand how to make money in up, down, and surprise markets. Whether new trader or experienced, college student or financial advisor, protecting against a crash or just trying to make a lot of money, trend following offers everyone an answer in uncertain times. To get started immediately, send me an email, michael@covel.com. I will send you the right trend following steps to take along with my free video. But if you want to buy and hold, trust the government and trust Wall Street, this is absolutely not for you.